Holidays, festivals, special times of celebration. Are we allowed to do these? Are we allowed to observe them? Well, let's talk about that on today's edition of Theology Thursday. Because of the way that America was formed, founded, our approach to some things is different than a lot of the rest of the world. And there are two primary streams that feed into that. The first stream that feeds into that is there's really no such thing as American culture. We are a melting pot of a host of subcultures. People come from all around the world to be here. My own family came from Germany. On my dad's side, my mom's side, they came from Scotland, Ireland. They were Scotch-Irish. Many of them settled in the South. If you live in the upper Midwest, there's a real good possibility your family immigrated from somewhere in Central Europe. Many of them came from Germany. Many came from Switzerland, Sweden. A lot of those places, they settled in the upper Midwest. A lot of people in New York came from Italy or from Ireland and some of these type of places. And so we just kind of a melting pot mesh. So that's the first stream. And then the second stream related to holidays and things that we have is that the early American settlers were Puritans. We could do multiple Theology Thursdays on the Puritans and what they believed, and much of what we think about the Puritans is simply incorrect. However, one thing that many of the Puritans were committed to was the fact that the only day we celebrate is the Christian Sabbath, Sundays. They did not believe in celebrating anything else. They considered them to be idolatrous, pagan, worldly, all that kind of stuff. And so they wanted to avoid all of that. So they would not even celebrate Christmas. So because of those two streams, there are no real lasting American holidays that are just ingrained in us and part of our identity and who we are. There are some specific American holidays. Obviously, July 4th is unique to America. Thanksgiving is, for the most part, unique to America, at least some that particular day called Thanksgiving, even though many cultures have some kind of Thanksgiving type of festival. But the reality is that those two streams, holidays are not that important. Let's not establish any. And then the fact that we're kind of a collection from all places, those two streams have led to an interesting view of holidays in America. So is it okay for Christians to celebrate these, especially considering our Puritan heritage? Are we allowed to do them? Well, the best place to start with is right here in the Bible. Did they celebrate holidays, special days? And the answer is yes, they did. So let me give you a chart. In the Old Testament, in the Hebrew Bible, there are 5 little scrolls called the Megillot. You can see them here. And you'll see that we have 5 festivals. There were originally 3 festivals that were given. Passover was very important. What we now call Pentecost, or the Feast of Ingathering, or the Feast of Weeks, sometimes it's called. And then we have booths, or Sukkoth, and that's where they would live in stick huts for a week to remember that they used to live like that when they were in the desert. And you can see that each of those festivals has a book that's connected with it in the Bible that would be supposed to be read, and then what it commemorates. Now, interestingly enough, one of those is the 9th of Av, which came around later in their history, and that was the destruction of Jerusalem in 586 BC by Nebuchadnezzar and the Babylonians, and Lamentations would be the obvious book to read for that. That's not a time of celebration. It's a time of remembering. And we have something similar to that. Certainly Memorial Day is a day where we reflect and remember on those who have given everything for the freedom and security that we have as citizens of the United States. And so while we celebrate and are thankful for our freedoms, it's also a day for us to reflect on the price that has been paid for us. Some people still, 9/11 is not a holiday, but it is a day where people remember. And it's not anything to be celebrated. That heroic acts of individuals, especially our first responders, is certainly be celebrated. But for the most part, it's a day of commemoration and remembering. Same with the attack on Pearl Harbor and some other things like that. So the Bible has these holidays. In addition to these 5 official holidays that God has given in Scripture, there are mention of others. New moons is one of those. So they would celebrate the beginning of each month. There are references to a New Year's festival. So it'd be similar to our type of New Year's Eve festival. And there seems to have been great celebrations and holidays, like for the coronation of a new king, days of celebration for a great event. David has a great day of celebration when they bring the ark into the city. So what you have is you have 3 sets of them. We have the God-ordained ones where God said, you will do this. And there were those 5 that we saw. Then there are those that are irregular, that like the Sabbath day, which God ordained, but that's a regular weekly thing, or new moons, or New Year's festival, or things that they seem to have done with regularity. And then there were, for lack of a better description, what I'll call one-off days that would be celebrated. And so let's answer 2 questions. The first question I want to answer is it biblical to celebrate holidays? The answer is yes. It is biblical to celebrate holidays. The Bible gives us some. You and I are supposed to commemorate what Jesus has done every time we take Lord's Supper. Jesus said he doesn't give a prescription on how often. He says, as often as you do this in remembrance of me. The Bible doesn't define us definitely celebrating Easter, but there's a reference in Acts to them celebrating it. So maybe they were already, in the early church, were setting aside these specific dates to celebrate the birth of Jesus or the resurrection of Jesus. So yes, we certainly can do that. The second question is, then what about non-biblical celebrations? The answer is yes and no. Here's what I mean by that. It's fine to celebrate things that are not actually specifically mentioned in the Bible as being celebrations, as long as they don't violate the Bible. So in other words, to celebrate your anniversary for your marriage is a great thing. Celebrate the birthdays of your kids is a wonderful thing. Maybe there are milestones in your life that are one-offs. If you are the first person in your family to graduate from college, and man, it's a huge deal for your family, and you have this big blowout celebration, that's awesome. It's wonderful. Families celebrating each other's accomplishments certainly doesn't violate anything that we find in Scripture. And so there are plenty of things that we can celebrate. You get a promotion at work, whatever it is. Maybe you have been working on remodeling your kitchen or remodeling your entire house or redoing the whole yard or whatever. It's been a pretty long and expensive and grueling project. You've done most of the work yourself and you do it. And you know what? We're going to have a family get-together. We're going to have some family friends over to celebrate us having this time together. And so, it's pretty cool deal. So those are fine, as long as they don't violate Scripture. Now, obviously, there's some things that we would not want to celebrate because they would violate things that are clearly taught in the Bible. You don't want to celebrate that you got your new shipment of drugs or something like that. But celebrations are fine. Now, I do want to say one other thing about them and about what the Puritans said. And I think we have to be careful on this. And that is, what about pagan elements that make their way into holidays that we celebrate? Are we allowed as Christians to do them? So the answer is twofold. The first one is cultural, and the second one is historical. So let's deal with the second question first, historical part. Some things entered in because way back in the far distant past, they had some kind of pagan meaning, but through history, they've completely lost that pagan meaning. Totally. You and I celebrate worshiping the sun on Sundays, but it's lost that whole meaning. Or celebrating the god Thor on Thursday, or whatever it is. we don't celebrate Saturn on Saturday. And so many things have lost their complete pagan connection. A lot of people that see a Pegasus don't believe in some kind of Greek mythology. They think of an oil company. And so even some of those symbols, unicorns come out of fairy tales and non-biblical stuff. But for many people, a unicorn is nothing magical or anything else. It's just a pretty something, or we even use the word for someone or something that is a very unique person or situation. So they've lost all kinds of attachments at all. So those are fine. However, in some cultures, some of those things still carry the idea of magic. And so we would not want to do them if we were living in one of those cultures because we want to draw a clear distinction. So a Christmas tree has a pagan background, but nobody thinks of that. The Easter bunny has a pagan background, but nobody thinks of that. The eggs have a pagan background, but nobody thinks of that. It's lost all that historically. And so I think that stuff's okay. I do have some questions about Halloween because it's still very much connected with the occult and Satan worship and things like that. So that's another Theology Thursday. Actually, I think I did one a couple years ago on that. So I just want to talk about that. I know there's not a lot of celebration stuff during the summertime in the United States outside of July 4th, but we do have some other days that I think are fine. Certainly Father's Day, Mother's Day, which celebrate something that's in the Bible. Celebrating anniversaries, which is something in the Bible. Celebrating victories and accomplishments in life, which is in the Bible. They're not prescribed, you must do these, but we find them. And so I think they're all fine and good. Matter of fact, underlying all of this is a fundamental belief that I have. And that is, Scripture teaches that we are to enjoy life. Jesus said, I come to have life, but have it more abundantly. Life will not be enjoyable apart from Jesus. We'll have fun here and there, but a life of regular joy only comes from living your life for Jesus Christ. But part of that is celebrating. It's okay. And so I think God, He sings over us with great joy, the Bible tells us. I think there is great rejoicing in heaven. And so I think it's great to rejoice and to celebrate those things in our life. And I think it's good for us because I think those celebrations also come with thankfulness. At least they should come with thankfulness for all that God has done for us. So the next time you have any kind of celebration or holiday, man, celebrate with full gusto and joy because our God is a good God and calls us to celebrate all that He has done for us. So God bless you, and I hope you have a great celebration the next time you have one scheduled.